Hello, this is James St. James, and in this episode, we're going to be talking about why illness exists.
Join me on my journey as I integrate ancient and modern medicine to reverse engineer intuitive healing so that you can re-engineer your body and mind to live vibrantly once again.
There are many factors that contribute to what we define as illness. Illness, as defined by the medical system, is a categorization of various symptoms that attribute to a particular disease. Now, illness in general can go beyond those categories as we use the word, and that's more or less what I want to talk about, is anything that negatively impacts the way that we think, feel, or function. For the purpose of this video, the type of illness that I'm specifically talking about is stress-related illness, as illness can be caused from a variety of things in life, such as traumatic incidents or even a bug bite. But for 90% of the cases out there, and especially when it comes to chronic illnesses that people live with year after year after year, that almost all of them have been attributed to this factor called stress. And this daily stress or this chronic stress is known to be an underlying factor for illness of many types. And it is what keeps us from feeling and experiencing life in the way that we ideally should. Since we were young, we started moving around this world, eating different things, thinking different things, saying different things, and we never really took notice of what things were actually damaging our body. Now, the human body is amazingly complex, as it is a composition of over 10 trillion cells, all working together synergistically in a number of systems that work together to create physiology, biology, and anatomical parts that comprise the human body. Now, it can be quite complex and it's quite extensive, but we can conceptualize it in a very simple way so that we can identify exactly what is stress and how that factor of stress contributes to most of the world's diseases. Stress, as the term regarding how we use it, when we say, like, you look stressed out, or I've been really stressed out lately, or my work's causing me stress, or I need to let go of my stress. We say these things because we just noticed that we don't feel well. But on a physical or physiological level, there has to be a reason why we don't feel well. And for a lot of people, we think it's just daily activity, or it's the way we think, or some kind of universal energy that's coming upon us. But for me, I'm a biomedical engineer, so I think of things in a very practical way. So for me, it's like I want to know and understand the actual physics behind stress. What is the actual anatomy of stress? Where does it show up? How do we see it? What kind of implications does it make on an electronic, on a physiological, and on a mechanical level for the human body? Now, by understanding stress, and being that it's noted in the scientific literature as a cause for many diseases, or at least one of the causes, then we can reverse engineer it to understand it's why illness exists in the first place. Because our body is so complex and there's so many systems that are all balancing each other, we are able to take on a lot of stress because the human body is amazingly well designed and well balanced. It is balanced in terms of biomechanics, in terms of physiology, and in terms of electrical properties, so that if one thing becomes damaged, other systems will become more activated or will become the opposite of whatever that damage is, or it can translocate damage into ways that don't hinder any critical physiological or physical functionality. And this is important for our survival as human beings because we don't want every little thing to keep us from, running or eating or speaking, because these are all the things that we need to survive. And so the human body will accumulate damage slowly over time. And in the beginning of our lives, we don't really notice it. Why? Because the body's really smart at how it allocates those things. Now, when we're young, we just go and we live life and we don't really think about health so much. However, when we're older, we think about health a lot because we've seen and experienced the consequences of what happens when we didn't take care of ourselves by fixing the damage earlier on, so that it compounded over time, and then later on, say in our 30s or 40s, we're experiencing not only the damage but the compounding effects that have cascaded since those injuries, whether they be emotional, physical, or chemical injuries, and then having that compound over time, maybe through decades, eventually leading to diseases, to inability to perform certain functions, to sexual dysfunction, to neurological dysfunction, and many other things that inhibit us from living the life that we ideally want to live. Because our society is so hectic and there's so many things to do, it makes it very difficult for us to live in such a way where we can actually negate the damaging effects. Because in so many of our lives, we feel so much stress from our workplace, from family relationships, from even things that we enjoy, such as sports and other hobbies. Then over time, these things, they add up. And when we're young, we go out and we play, we fall down, we get back up, and we don't really think about taking care of those injuries at the time. And the human body will heal itself in order to maintain functionality. Say if you scrape your knee, it's not just going to keep bleeding, because we shouldn't lose that much blood. So eventually it's going to heal the skin over. But the scar is not going to go away for a very long time. The reason behind that is because the tissue itself did not regenerate. The tissue that you see as a scar is merely just a band-aid that the body is using to cover the damage and prevent further injury. So it's really just a temporary solution that allows you to function. But just because your body is functioning, it doesn't mean that it's operating at a peak efficient state. So to operate at a peak efficient state, it would need the optimal conditions to operate physiologically at a peak performance. And in order for that to happen, the extracellular matrix, or the structure of our body, needs to be in a cohesive and well-structured way, so that blood vessels and lymph vessels, nerve vessels, and water flow can reach every single cell in the tissues in our body, so that those cells can be nourished, so that they can maintain their homeostasis, which will keep them healthy, and then also be able to optimally perform their physiological functions. Failure for the cell to perform its physiological functions would mean that as a whole for that tissue, and say that tissue is an organ, that organ will not be able to perform its functions as well, which can lead to things like people feeling a lack of energy, or type 2 diabetes, or cardiovascular disorders, or even digestion problems. These are just a few examples of ways that our body can break down, and what happens when damage goes untreated for long periods of time. And we may not think about it this way, but the body is amazingly interconnected. And to give an example, we have what's known as the sinew channels running through our body. And the way that the body is designed, it's so that they counterbalance. To counterbalance the sinew channels, which are stress and force-bearing tension-like cables that are these bands of collagen fibers that run throughout like our feet to our head and our hands to our head. And when those are balanced in the body, they run through the torso, often innervating the organs. And the organs, if the bands or the sinew channels become tense, then that tension will apply a literal stress tension force on the organ, pulling it apart. Even one of my best friends and a mentor that I had many years ago, he died because his heart literally ripped apart. And the doctors, said, of course, like, he was stressed and he had a broken heart, which in our common day language sounds super normal. And to a certain degree, that is normal. But if you think about how we could live as human beings, to think like, well, do you want to continue living in stress? That might just be an option. Do you want to continue living with these stress-related diseases? If you can resolve stress, then it would only make sense that a stress-related disease would be nearly impossible. Because if there's no stress, how can you get a disease that's caused from stress? Now, it's just that in our society, it's very normal to have these diseases, because in our society, it's very normal to have so many stresses. But not every society is like that. And for your life, you can choose exactly how much stress you take on. And there's actually another video in this series that talks about how to create a lifestyle where you can take on less stress and ideally preserve yourself so there's not so much damage to your body and your mind later on in life. And so I would suggest checking that out, as well as there's another video defining stress and like how it forms and then why it exists as well. And these are important factors for you so that you can understand. It's like, okay, well, there's this concept of illness, and these are the foundational building blocks, which like stress and damage that lead to that. And so the way that I look at the body as a biomedical engineer, and I'm currently studying to be underneath the mentorship of an intuitive healer here in Indonesia, from my perspective, or from the perspective of a healer, it really comes down to seeing the human body as a machine. And when I see the human body as a machine, it's like, I don't think about there being a category of symptoms. I don't think about there being imbalances. I don't think about patterns like they use in Chinese medicine or Ayurvedic medicine. What I see is just damage. Kind of like if you were to see a window that's dirty, you might have dust in a corner and like markers drawn on some of it, and then like maybe some dirt or something. And ideally it would be a clean window. And so for you, it's very clear and easy to see, like, okay, I need to take a towel and mark, wipe here, wipe here, wipe here, and now I have a clean window. And in that same way, I view the human body. And so for the body, when it becomes damaged, that damage in its structure is inhibiting the cells and the organs and every part of the body, even the electrical channels, from functioning properly. When we notice that our functionality is declining, especially when it comes to the mind or some critical organ function, that's when we start maybe going to the hospital and asking our doctor, like, hey, there's something wrong with me, and I hope you can figure this out. And then the doctor, they're going to use the medical system to understand what your symptoms are and then categorize it a certain way, and then apply the treatment that fits that category. However, that doesn't necessarily mean it will fit you, but it is just one way of looking at how to treat it. And so that's one tool, but at the same time, what I suggest is not letting it get to the point where it becomes a medical emergency. I think that if you're able to just understand where the damage is ahead of time, then you can understand how to fix it so that eventually it doesn't lead to something like a disease. So if you can fix damage, and that's the way I see it, most people would say stress, and then you would be able to reduce the amount of damage in your body, which would make the organs and the tissues function better, which would make it very unlikely that any disease would develop. And so disease develops because of damage. It's impossible for a non-damaged, perfectly functioning tissue to have a disease, because it would literally go against the laws of biology and, by extension, the laws of physics. You cannot have like a perfect system but then have some horrible outcome. That doesn't make sense unless there's like a nuclear bomb or some crazy event that happens. And so for disease, we just have to really think about like, what is the damage? And for most people, it's very difficult to see that. Like even for me, like I'm training day in and day out alongside what most people would say is an intuitive healer, so that I can understand exactly how like people with special capabilities are able to understand and see damage that might be so slight, like emotional damage or trauma that happened from someone's childhood. In this sense, you don't really need all that to just understand what kind of damage exists within you, because like you've been there your whole life with you, and you've seen everything, and you've been through the trauma, you've felt the pain, and you're living in that consequence of that trauma and those pains right now. And that means that you can take advantage of that so that you can, fix the damage before it becomes too late. One of the aspects of stress that I think is really fascinating to me, and something I did not take seriously before, but I really should have, is the concept of compounding interests. Now, illness, or you could say maybe the dark side of universal energy that keeps us held back from our potential as human beings, it is very smart. Just like a person who gives out loans, say for a credit card, that credit card is going to have 10% to 20% interest on everything that you spend. And so when we're a child, we're spending this credit card very easily, and we don't realize at that time, like that 10 to 20% per year can add up to a lot. So if you hurt something when you're young, and say you hurt maybe your leg, but in the instant, that's only like some amount of damage. But you have to consider that every single year that injury goes not fixed and untreated, that you have to add 10 to 20% based on your lifestyle to that injury. And then here's also what happens. Because there's an injury and the extracellular matrix is damaged, it loses its plasticity, meaning it becomes rigid and malformed, which will make the tissue in that immediate area suffer because of the lack of blood flow, nerve flow, lymph flow, and water flow. But it will also create tension, because it's literally a ball of tension that creates a 360-degree radius of tension in every direction with whatever amount of force that it's pulling into itself. And for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction, not only in the laws of physics, but in the laws of biology. So that tension is going to start pulling on other areas of your body so that your body can stay balanced and you can like walk straight. So that's why it's really important for us to take action immediately when it comes to illness, or not even immediately, but beforehand. And for us, illness might seem like it comes out of nowhere and that it's kind of seems random, but really, oftentimes it's something that happened a long time ago that compounded over time. Every year, 10% worse, 10% worse, 10% worse, 10% worse, until, that knee becomes so weak that you're like, oh my gosh, like I have so many days where I can barely get out of bed. Or your digestive system becomes so weak, like you can't eat gluten anymore. Or your heart becomes so weak that your heartbeat starts increasing and your blood pressure goes up. Then at that point, it's almost, I'm not going to say like too late, but at that point it's going to be really difficult to fix the issues. But that is the concept of where illness comes from. The other important note to take on this is that a lot of people will think that because something's like in your knee, that it's not going to affect, say, your mental health, and that knee health and mental health is two different things. But because the body is so interconnected and the electrical channels that move through your body require that the tissue in every single section of your body be healthy and well maintained in terms of its structure and its electrical capacitance, that if the tissue in your knee, for example, becomes disturbed or becomes like coagulated or like even torn, then it's going to ruin the capacitance and the electrical flow moving through your knee. That electrical flow is the impulses created from the organs and the chemical reactions throughout your body that creates this wave-like pattern of electrical flow that we experience as emotions. And then when our emotions become disturbed, then we get irritated and we can get frustrated, we can get angry, we can get, worry is another one. It can lead to many negative mental health issues. And so in order to maintain our mental health, surprisingly, we have to maintain a lot of our body. Not only that, do we have the electrical channels in the body, but we also have many parts of our mind that exist within our body as well. So not only do we have the brain, which is responsible for interpreting emotions and activating various parts of the brain based on that interpretation of the electrical flow in our body. What most people don't realize about the body is how interconnected it is. And because of how interconnected many parts of us are, whether it be from the physical point or whether it be from the electrical channels that move through our body, or even the way that our organs interact with each other and how that affects the nervous system and how our brain works, that these illnesses that we see being in one part of our body can easily affect things like our mental health and can affect our personality, can affect our organ function. And this leads to many diseases, and diseases that are usually attributed to chronic stress. It's very easy for an injury, even on our body, to affect our mental state, our mind, and even our personality. The reason why is because our mind is located physically throughout our body, not just our brain. Our brain is one part of our mind and is a central processing system, but we actually have 6 nervous systems along with 6 major nerve plexuses, which are independent operating junctions where nervous signals are processed that go in the front of our spine to our organs. And then we also have the 6 primary electric channels that move through our entire body that create emotions. And from this, we also have the 6 sets of organs as well. To learn more about the body, all the different aspects of the mind, and how the whole thing works, I actually have another video in the series that you can check out in the link in the description. But for the sake of brevity, to go through this and explain how this relates to illness, just understand that for our mind, all the pieces of us that create our personality, it's many things. It's not just the brain. And this is another reason why, it seems like mental illness is hard to avoid for people. It's because they keep thinking of the brain, but the brain is so protected within our skull, and generally there's not really much that can add to it or take away from it because it's very limited in terms of the interaction for our brain. It's really just the result of what's happening in our body. because, for example, if your liver is deficient in being able to supply carbohydrates into the bloodstream, then you're easily going to run out of mental energy when performing mental arduous tasks. Another example is when the brain is trying to reform connections and requires a lot of neural processing. In order for that to happen, the brain is operating at a very delicate electrolytic homeostatic state, meaning that the electrolytes or the minerals that exist in the neuronal junctions have to be maintained in a very particular degree of freedom. So that if you remove any of the electrolytes or if you add to them in any percentage difference, that it will make a severe impact in your mental processing, and usually in a negative way. The organ that would be responsible for doing that is the kidneys, because the kidneys, along with the bladder, articulate the way that our body distributes electrolytes and also inadvertently the flow of water between cells and into the extracellular fluid. This is why it's important to consider all parts of the body when trying to understand illness, and especially mental illness. A lot of people think that mental illness has to do something with their brain, and so the only way to adjust it would be to use chemicals or to use herbs or some kind of nutrient. But you can actually adjust many things about the person's personality by adjusting the other parts of the mind or regenerating tissues in the organs or the electrical pathways of the body. And this will allow the person to have enhanced electrical flow and to not impede that, and to enhance the organs so that those organs can supply the brain with the right nutrients and electrolytic balance that it needs to process at peak efficiency. Through that, and maintaining the blood flow and nerve flow to the brain through the vagus nerve and the spinal cord, then we can have our mind operating at its peak efficiency. And then not only that, by, if you do that for your organs, then it's very unlikely that you'll get any other types of diseases or illnesses as well. So in summary, illness exists because of damage to our body. Damage in the body can occur from many things throughout our life, and the three types of that damage would be the chemical damage, the physical damage, or the electrical damage, which would translate to negatively managing or mismanaging emotions, which would create a disturbance in the electrical channels throughout our body, causing excess tension and a very difficult, sustainable ecosystem for the organs as well. Then you have the physiological or the chemical way of embodying stress, which would be toxins in the food or in the air that we breathe can all cause damage internally, as our body can store those toxins, and if they cross the blood-brain barrier, can directly affect the brain as well. Then you have the mechanical, which is more obvious to people, which would be, maybe you're walking all day as a waitress at work and it affects your knees, or you have a sports hobby where you often take a little bump or bruise or maybe a few broken bones here and there. All these things add up, and they add up over time to create so much damage in the body that if we don't fix it early on, then those are the kind of things that compound over time and eventually lead to becoming an illness of some type later on. So hopefully this gives you a general overview of how the damage or the stresses in our life can slowly add up and build to illness or mental illness should we not take preventative measures to fix the damage ahead of time. If we can fix it soon, and the sooner that we fix the problems that we've accidentally created, is the sooner that we can stop paying interest on them, and the sooner that these injuries, whether emotional, whether they're chemical, or whether they're physical, can stop affecting other systems as well, so that we can take control of our health, we can take control and fix the damage so that we can feel better, so that we can have our organs function better, so that we can have our mind function better, and so that we can live better lives. If you want to learn more about how the body works in a simple way, and then how to fix it also in a simple, effective, and efficient way, then I suggest checking out the other videos on this channel. I also want to encourage you to think timely about when it is right for you to begin your journey in the healing process. And you can check out the other videos in this series about what is the healing process and like how to operate efficiently with that healing process by following the links in the description. With that said, best of luck on your healing journey. I hope you found this video useful. If you could think of someone who might benefit from this information, then please feel free to share this video or series with them. Also, please feel free to check out the other videos in this channel, as we're producing almost a video a week with the intention of bringing you tools to help you transform your mind so that you can improve your mental and physical performance. If you would like to support our mission to provide mental wellness to the world, then please consider making a tax-deductible donation to the Nootripure Foundation, for which is a link in the description. And I look forward to helping you create a better you.